What is the origin of esotericism, occultism, mysticism, and secret societies? People have a common misconception that these concepts been around in the modern era, 19th century or even 16th century. Some, many historians included, argue that it goes from antiquity, from quote unquote the West, starts in the 6th century BC with Pythagoras, which he never existed. Plato will be technically the first with his mathematical mystical elements of, you know, the number of realities, or in India with yoga, if they started as far back as 6th century BC, and from the 3rd century BC with Taoist mysticism and esotericism with magic of manipulating weather and inner alchemy. This is not actually the case. The concept of secret societies, esotericism, occultism, and mysticism actually goes far back when the concept of authoritarian power first emerged. People forget that 95% of human history did not have hierarchies. Today we call these primitive societies, although people use the word in a racist manner, but people lived in the word anarchist communism. It wasn't until 12,000 years ago when hierarchy was first established. But at the very beginning, it was a permanent thing. It was a temporary thing. And it was more theatrical than anything. But eventually, these early humans took advantage of this primitive the power they have and make it dominant in a way that we see nowadays. And they use these temporarily privileges of these hierarchical structures instead of feeder but actual power. And these early hierarchies managed to make it permanent and establish power and domination. And this is where the origins of private property itself, because private property was originally a religious in nature, where gods' spirits is the property owner, and the priest, shaman, or other similar position were a security guard, or taking care of the property, and will use violence to protect God's property. Or for priests and shamans, which immaterial property, which was magic, which at the time would be language, because if language was considered a magical product, and early written scriptures were considered magical in nature, was the most important. And this is why secret societies, occultism, esotericism, mysticism was originally to safeguard the early priests and early kings, which back then both titles were basically the same. And they safeguard what is considered the reproduction game from one season to the next, magical formulas and stories, because story was to make fictional narratives to legitimize their rules. Medical knowledge, perform certain rituals, mathematical knowledge, and later writing. Words were considered magical powers. This is where occult mysticism, esotericism, and secret society started. Not from the 6th century BCE by Pythagoras with his magical numbers, or Hinduism with the Veda where have magical spells, how to control demons, sexual magic and ritual, magical yoga, how to achieve supernatural powers, etc. As evidence points out that it was early to control immaterial private property. And remember, before hierarchy was established, people have a common misconception of Hobbesian view that life is short, brutish. And in reality, before 12,000 years ago, before hierarchy was established, only 3% of every single death in the world up at that time was violent deaths. And was it after 12,000 years ago, where hierarchy was first established, where early shaman kings and early religious groups started to take hold, and permanent rise of tribal violence and human sacrifice and early massacres. And it showed that after hierarchy was first established, those 3% of violent deaths has raised to 15% of violent deaths. It shows you that from the very beginning, these concepts, although now they are considered to understand and liberate yourself, was originally meant a form of domination.